The death toll for the American strikes on boats off the coast of Venezuela has now passed 50.
Yeah, this comes as Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says 4 more strikes took place over the weekend. Joining us now to talk about this and much more is Princeton University's Dr. Lauren Wright. Always good to see you, Dr. Wright.
Morning.
In terms of these strikes, 3 things sort of stand out to me. One, these alleged narco-terrorists are simply being killed, not arrested, tried, given due process. The survivors of the strikes aren't prosecuted. They've just been repatriated back to their countries. And Congress continually is asking the Trump administration for more information about who these people are, what drugs that they are carrying. What of those 3 concerns you the most?
I think those are 3 very valid concerns, Corey. You know, the president and the administration aren't getting much pushback on this from the American public because the information is so limited and they're focused on other more pressing issues like the shutdown, for instance, that I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit after this. But the problem is starting to be that senators like Rand Paul, for instance, who is an ally of the president in most cases, even though he's sort of an independent voice in Congress, and he's saying, we need to see some evidence here, essentially. Let us see that you know for sure these are drug boats. The problem, of course, with blowing them up, even though the U.S. has said we have the intel and we're certain, and Trump has thrown certain things out there like, what boat have you ever seen with 4 engines on the back? It would have really help tell the story better and build public support for this if there was just more information the administration can share. With that said, I think the sort of military operation where you're putting troops at risk, intercepting the ships. I'm not a military analyst. I'm sure there are reasons not to do that, and I'm sure it's very dangerous. But, you know, the Trump administration is saying, trust us, we know these things, and that is going to cause some problems if there's not more information down the line.
You know, on Monday, we spoke to a retired Coast Guard general who told us all about a program called Hit Run that's still operating. It's very successful. They're helicopters. They find the boats. They have these 50 caliber sniper rifles. They shoot out the engines. Hardly anyone has died. Then they board the ship. They make arrests. They get intel from the subjects, and they're prosecuted. So he made the point, you know, there's no evidence, and he thinks one of the reason these people are being let go when they do find them, because there's no evidence to prosecute.
Yep, that's a really good point. And it's exactly the kind of common sense question I really think a lot more Americans would be asking if they were paying closer attention to this. It's only a story that's going to get bigger. Of course, not least of which the reason is President Trump's floated ground operations, for instance, if this does reach closer to U.S. soil.
Let me ask you, because history is sort of your wheelhouse. Does the administration have a duty to inform Congress of what is happening?
Well, that's actually a more complicated question than we think. If it's an impending immediate threat to the U.S., they don't. That's where the president's far-reaching military authority as commander-in-chief, that's where he gets that power, because the duty of the president is to protect Americans from an imminent threat. And that's what he's saying this is. They're waging war through deadly narcotics on the American people. Now, I do think that's a question that courts will sort out in addition to the court of public opinion. But in many instances, I can point to Democrats and Republicans who have used the military authority of the presidency and tried to do things without the explicit approval of Congress. Obama, for instance, is a great example of this. But this really is an issue where a lot of the same questions that were out there in the wake of the Iraq war, for instance. How do we know there are weapons of mass destruction? Should we be asking more questions about this? Those sorts of questions, though the scale is much different, are starting to be in the air in and around Washington. And the ones Corey mentioned and you mentioned, Hillary, are definitely in the mix.
All right, let's talk about the shutdown. We got a statement from the largest federal employee union this week calling on parties to end the shutdown, saying that they've made their point. But even this morning, we're hearing from members of that very union telling Democrats hold the line on things like health care. Meanwhile, SNAP benefits are going to run out at the end of this week.
Yeah.
We're reaching all of these pain points as the calendar continues to move forward. Do you see any end in sight in this, and do you feel one party is more to blame than the other?
Well, the case against Democrats is pretty clear because they, you know, care so much about these programs like SNAP that they've had a heavy hand in both initiating and ensuring the funding is there over and over again each and every year. They fight for programs like SNAP, where the majority of the recipients, by the way, are children. So it is a valid question if they are concerned about these things. Why is SNAP less important than Obamacare, for instance? It's also just a really inappropriate forum to negotiate something complicated like state benefits for implementing Obamacare and other public health programs in the midst of a shutdown when Republicans have said they won't budge. However, there's a lot of things Republicans could do better too. I mean, they could really force Democrats' hand by having some ready to go ideas about how they might provide health care and force Democrats to show themselves as purists. Because frankly, if Republicans did propose a plan to extend some of the elements of Obamacare, Democrats might say, you know what, that's crumbs, it's not enough, it's not okay, and we're going to continue this shutdown. So I actually don't think that either party will come out of this smelling like a rose, or even, something more in the middle of that. I think Americans are really angry at Republicans and Democrats for allowing this to go on so long. And each party leader that says they're not to blame and they're not going to be the subject of the blame is completely incorrect on that. Americans are just angry at Congress and they want to see this end.
All right, Dr. Lauren Wright, always great to have you. Thanks so much.
See you next week.
Thank you.